Okay, let's do some practice with factoring by grouping. So we'll start with this one here. The first thing I want to do actually is I'm going to change this 3 to a 9. The way it is, it's actually not going to work. So we have 9x squared plus 3xy minus 12x minus 4y. So first step, we want to group the first two. So group the first two. So 9x squared plus 3xy. And then plus, I like to always put plus, even though this is a minus right here, I'm going to put plus and then keep that 12x negative. So minus 12x minus 4y. So then we factor out a GCF from each set of parentheses. So this first one, we have a 9 and we have a 3 for our coefficients, which means we're going to want to factor out 3. And then we have x squared, and we have an x in this second term, which means we can factor out 1x. And then we'll be left with 3x, because if we factor a 3 out of the 9, we're left with 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. And then if we took out one of these x's, we're left with 1. So then plus, we factored this 3 out, so we're just left with 1 as our coefficient. And then we factored this x out as well, so now we're just left with y. So for this second group here, I'm actually going to factor out a negative because I'm thinking ahead and I know that I'm going to want this set of parentheses to be the same as this one. And these are both negative, but I want them to be positive because these are positive. So let's factor out a negative. And now that plus is going to be a minus. I'm also going to factor out a 4 because we have a 12 and we have a 4. And 4 goes into both of those. So minus 4. Okay, so since we took out that negative, this is going to become positive, and we factored out a 4, so it's going to become 3x, positive 3x, plus, because again, we took out this negative, plus y. So that worked out exactly how we wanted it because this set of parentheses is the same as this one. So now we factor out that like term. So 3x plus y, and then what we're left with once we factor out this and this is 3x minus 4. So 3x minus 4. All right, let's do the next one. So it's the same idea. We're going to do the same set of 3 steps. So first step, group the first two. I don't want that dot there. So group the first two. So 16x squared minus 200x. Then the second two, negative 12x plus 150. Then we're going to factor out a GCF. So I did that thing again where I made this a plus just so I could keep everything the same. Just pointing that out. So this first set of parentheses, I can factor out a 4 from both of those. So let's do that. So 4. And then I also have an x squared here and an x here. So just realizing now I can factor out more than a 4. So why don't we factor out the greatest common factor? We can factor out an 8 as well, can't we? So 8, and then like I said, x. So then we'll be left with 2x minus 25. And then now, again, we're going to want these to be the same. So I'm going to factor out a negative here because I want this first term to be positive, just like this one. And I'm going to factor out a 6. And I can't factor out an x because this 150 doesn't have an x. So then I'm left with 2x minus 25. And then what we have here, so we ended up with what we wanted. These two sets of parentheses are the same. So we factor out that like term. So 2x minus 25 is our like term here. And then what we're left with is 8x minus 6. Okay, last example. So we're going to do that same exact thing. Start by grouping together the first two and the last two. And then factoring out a GCF. So this first one, we have 3x, because both terms, you can factor a 3 out of a 3 and out of an x. Sorry, and out of a 6. And then we have x's in both terms. So then we're just left with y, because we factored out the 3 and the x. So we're left with a y minus 2. Because 6, we took out a 3, so we're just left with a 2. Plus, so then for 2 and 4, we can factor out a 2. And then we're left with y minus 2, which again, that's exactly what we wanted, because we have y minus 2 and y minus 2, which means we can factor out now that like term, which is y minus 2, and we're left with 3x plus 2. So again, with factoring by grouping, it only works if you end up with the same thing in both sets of parentheses. And yeah, it's the same 3 steps every time.